Excuse me. Black Eagle. Let's start here. I'm not usually a fan of showing things before they're done, but you're here, so we thought it would be kind of fun for just you coming down to see where we're up to and what we're trying to do and why, and what it is we're doing with this thing. I'll give you a little bit of explanation. So the idea behind this particular model, because you're all familiar with the Black Eagle now, right? You've seen the Black Eagle, the volumetric machine that's out there. Looks good. This one is the gravimetric. And what we want to do is, for a long time, volumetrics were fine. They're good. They work okay. But then we started to pay attention to espresso in a different way. We started to measure what was actually happening when we make coffee. And if you've done this even a little bit, you pretty quickly work out that very small changes in the cup, in terms of beverage mass, as in how much liquid is in the actual espresso, have quite big effects on extraction and on flavor. We agree? If not, just not anyway, I'll feel better. The problem with volumetrics is that all you're doing is deciding and measuring how much water you send to the ground coffee. Yeah? That's all a volumetric machine understands. What I'm interested in understanding is what we've actually done, what we've actually achieved. And that means we need to look at what's happened, what's in the actual cup itself. So we started to look at, a lot of people have been doing this for a while, which is brewing using weighing scales. Has anyone here started, at some point, made espresso by weighing the liquid? Have we done this? Excellent. Of those of you who've done it, how many of you have broken a set of scales doing it? Excellent. It's difficult, and they have a really brilliant solution for this. So, do we understand how weighing scales works? Let's start with a little explanation. Using this and this. This is very important. And anyone know what this is? What, sorry? Yeah, it's a load cell. It's what the English term for it is a load cell. So I'll explain this in a second. So the way this machine works is under every group head we have a tray. And we just want a tray under the group head because we all know that if you put the scales under the group head, then that's where bad things happen. Because this side of the machine, there are people like me who break things, and there is water and steam, and those are all bad. So the way it works is the tray just hangs on to two forks that are then mounted to this inside the machine, because this is the important bit. And how they work is kind of cool. How load cells work. What you do is you basically you run a current through the metal. And what happens is when you apply weight on one end, the metal bends a little bit. And when you bend a metal, its conductivity changes. And you can measure that. And if you are very smart, which I'm not, you can take that variance in resistance in the metal and turn it into weight. And that's how they all work. And the difference is, in this one here, it's just smaller. And the little pocket scales that you get, like the load cells about that big, but if you open them up and turn them, has anyone opened them up? There's like a little tiny one of these. It looks just like this, but it's about that big. So it's the same idea throughout. So what we can do is have the machine understand, as the liquid hits the cup, how much liquid is actually there. This is good, because if we can have a consistent amount of liquid in the cup, our espresso will taste pretty consistent. That's good, because that means when I go to a coffee bar, I don't just get good coffee sometimes, I get good coffee every time. That's more interesting to me. But we still have a few problems to overcome. Let me talk about how this works. Because you all know how an espresso machine works. There's a little valve inside the group head, the solenoid valve. Now, when we make coffee on scales, we know this is a problem, because if I want, say, 36 grams of liquid, if I wait till my scale says 36 and push stop, well, there's liquid after the valve is closed that just hasn't gotten through the coffee, down the spouts, into my cup. It's in the air, so to speak. It's kind of a phrase you might use. Now, one thing we discovered pretty early on, which was interesting, sometimes when I come here, I use the coffee that they have just for testing, like the super automatic machines, that they just use it and grind it just to make sure stuff works. That coffee is not the greatest coffee in the world. Is that okay to say that?
West, yes.
Okay. We
use 100 kilos per day, so we cannot buy the specialty coffee for that.
It would be a terrible sadness because it just
sorry.
but it was interesting to make coffee with it because these coffees are typically lower grown coffees. They're a little less dense, and if you make espresso with them, towards the end of the brew, the flow rate actually is quite slow. It slows down. The espresso almost starts to slow down and start to drip towards the end, like no more liquid can come through. Whereas the kind of coffees that, let's say, you might see at WBC, you see them brew and you see them get faster and faster and faster and faster. Which means that different coffees, when I hit stop, may have a different amount of liquid in the air, so to speak. So there's two things that we can program on this machine. Let me stand to the side and demonstrate a microwave kind of way. So at the moment, it's going to say CCs. Ignore that. It's because we're using a lot of the same software that you use to program volumetrics on a radio T3 or on a Black Eagle right now. So I select the button I want to program, and I get a number, 33 right now. That's how much liquid I want in grams in the cup in total. Happy there? Mm-hmm. And to change that, I just scroll my little wheel up and down, wherever I want it to be. I'll go to 34. Yeah, it's good. And I click save, and it's done. I've just programmed just this button. Now I can patch whatever's here to another group very easily using the dose transfer. If I want to get weird, I suppose I could program all the buttons differently, but that would not be good for my cafe. And then I'll come home. So now, this is going to try and produce 33 grams of liquid, and it should be set up to do just that. And we've programmed it for this coffee that we're using right now. But we talked about that amount in the air, and we're kind of calling an offset, so to speak. So what we're going to tell it is, stop. I want how many grams before it's done. You know what I mean? Like, we're saying with this coffee, there's about 3 grams of liquid in the air. Now, if I put a different coffee in, and instead of getting the 33 every time, I get 35 every time, even though I ask for 33, then I just need to move my offset 2 further back. Pretty easy. And it will just cut at the right time. And you can set an offset for each button as well, because you might have 2 different recipes on the machine, so each button has an offset. If you're brewing something super high grown and super dense, and then you're also brewing something like a Pacamara, which is a little bit weird in terms of grind settings, they're much less dense, you could set them up differently for that. Are we happy?
Yeah.
Is this making sense? Cool. And I'll tell you why I'm excited about this. I don't make coffee much anymore. It's been a really long time since I was on stage doing that, and even then I barely made a lot of coffee. But people, sometimes I work a booth at a trade show, sometimes I'm hanging out, and someone comes up and they're like, "Ah, champion, make me an espresso." You know what I mean? And you're like, "Oh dear." Because they have expectations that are quite high about how good this espresso is going to taste. Now, for years and years and years, brewing espresso felt a little bit like guessing. Do you know what I mean? Like you pull a shot, you're like, I think this is good. You know what I mean? And the person would look with expectation, and you'd stop the shot, and you're like, you know, usually about here it's good. I got pretty good at guessing, so here we go. But it's still just a guess. You know my feeling? You know this feeling. And maybe it's someone who's going to be honest and mean to me about how it tastes, and that isn't as bad. And I make less and less coffee all the time. But I realized that if I had a setup where I have a recipe, and all I'm doing is following a recipe, well, it's not really about me anymore. It's kind of exciting. I kind of don't matter. It's pretty good. Right? Someone came in today and very kindly gave me some coffee, and I was like, "What's your recipe?" And they're like, 20 grams in, let's do 35 in 26 seconds. I was like, "Cool, let's do that." But we did that. And they were like, "How's that?" "Great, good. Nothing to do with me." That makes me very happy. I just want help to be confident and put cups down where I know, because we've actually measured what it is that I wanted to do, I've achieved it. That's kind of exciting to me, to actually know with confidence that I've made something that I meant to on purpose every time I push the button. You with me? It's because I'm not making any coffee, by the way. So that's how we go. Now, let me do this. It's very nerve-wracking, more than expecting. The way that we make coffee and the way we use a machine, let's call it our workflow, the order in which we do things and the habits that we have. Often we pick those up when we start making coffee with the machine that we started with. Lots of us do a thing where before we brew coffee, we like to flush a lot of water out of the group head for no good reason whatsoever, just to waste it, I think. Because we learned on machines that were not stable enough and we had to flush a lot of water out of them. You know what I mean? It's kind of a bad habit. Occasionally I'll be like a 5-second flush. I'm like, that was completely unnecessary and frankly wasteful. No point. I just need to push, you know, it's done. I'm cleaning, doing nothing else. So here, we've got a different process and I'm going to need a very slightly different workflow, because what we're doing is something that's actually pretty difficult to do, which is accurately measure liquid in the cup. So what the machine needs to do is know when to ignore the cups, so to speak, because if we don't want to know what the cups weigh, the cups are irrelevant, we're just interested in the liquid in there. So the way this works, and don't freak out that there's a couple of extra clicks just because we're playing with something at the moment, after about 3.5 seconds, it will start to sort of push 0 in the computer. Not just once, but a few times, just because there might be a little bit of residual movement, and we've all put things on scales and hit 0 too soon and found out that it still says 6 grams. You're like, well, why? I just pushed 0. And you push 0 again, and then you get the real reading. And it'll do that to about 5.5 seconds. Anything after this, it thinks is coffee. Okay? So if I put my finger in the cup, which would be hot, but you know, we could do it, it wouldn't know the difference between the liquid coffee and my finger, so to speak. If I push down on it, even if I move my cups around a little bit too much, I'm adding the weight and it may hit the target weight and be like, all right, you're done, thank you very much. I've done what you asked me to do. So it's workflow-wise, it's not a problem. We have a little residual wiggle on this table, but frankly, if you have a coffee bar that wobbles this much, please close. It is not safe. And build another one. So here you have time, and next to it you have live weight in the cup. What was our target again? 33? 34? We get it 34? Let's find out. We can always go back and check. So it'll cut, liquid in the air. We go. The thing that's interesting for me is that if I'm getting my weight in and my weight out to be accurate, I have a window, in my opinion, of time in which my extractions are very similar, so to speak. If I get my in and out right within 27 seconds or 29 seconds or even 26 seconds, the extractions are actually pretty close. If you go and test this out, it's surprising how close they are. Which means that I can say to someone, if you pull anything between 26 and 29 seconds, I don't mind anywhere in that 4-second window, but you hit the right in and out, sell it for money because it's going to be delicious. That's the QC point there. Like if it's in the window, you may sell it to somebody. If it is not, please don't sell it to somebody because they will be sad, and I will be sad. So you saw it cut a little early. Once about 2 seconds after the shot stops, it'll freeze whatever's on the screen, just so I can take the cups off and still see what my old weight was for a little while. Otherwise, if I take the cups off, I've lost that recording of what just happened. Make sense? Yeah. Sometimes you want to look back and be like, what was that? What did I do? I was right? Okay, good. Make sense? Another thing about the scale that's worth noting, it's not a weighing scale like that is a weighing scale on the end there. Because it can't go backwards. It's not how it thinks. So if you add some weight and take your finger off, the number will never go back down just because of how it takes data in. And actually getting data in is super challenging because, well, there's signal and there's noise, as the phrase goes, and that ratio can get a little messy. And some stuff is fine because if your noise is pretty consistent, you can tune it out. And in this case, you might argue that bolting a pump to the same frame with 3 accurate and sensitive load cells, that's not very smart. Why don't you just have an external pump, which can be a little bit frustrating sometimes, but internal pumps are kind of useful, good, make life easier. But the nice thing about pumps is they produce a very stable frequency in terms of that vibration and what's coming out of them. And we can teach the load cells, just ignore that. That's whatever that cycle, that noise is, ignore that. And equally, we're at a point where you don't just have to make 1 coffee at a time on the 3 group, because that would be, you know, a bit of a statement, but sort of pointless. You can make coffee on all the groups at the same time and steam milk and use it as a regular coffee machine without losing accuracy. But stuff like the biggest stuff actually in the situation is with this backwards forwards wiggle, that's much more like weight on the load cell at this moment. So if you're having a little play with this later on, try not to be too wiggly with it because you may confuse it slightly. But frankly, again, on a proper coffee bar, I don't really worry about that whatsoever. Are we happy so am I making sense? Is there any questions at this point? Because, yes.
How much of a variance have you noticed as the base of your vessel moves closer to the spouts, as far as the light?
Wait, come again?
So say if you programmed it for, what was it, three mils
Yep.
with your demi-task sitting
Yep.
on the tray, what if you want to get your demi-task closer and the next one you stack it on top of the second one?
That seems a convoluted workflow. I don't know, I've never tried
No, it
that.
is. I'm just wondering.
I assume the difference
have
of what's in the air is so small.
Have you checked out what the correspondences between height and that lag?
No, because every time we've brewed, the height's been actually pretty consistent. It's been pretty much the height on the base of whatever cup, but that's about like a centimeter of porcelain maximum, and maybe with a paper cup it's a fraction of a millimeter or two. But I haven't seen, or we haven't really played with that, and it's fair.
I'm just curious how much of it happens within the portafilter and in the group, and how much of it is actually
in the air. I would say more of it's about what's in the portafilter still. And just exit. It's the kind of post-basket, pre-spout liquid, I think, is the stuff that's probably the most interesting and most voluminous there. But it's an interesting question, and certainly something we can play with and test pretty easily. The machine's actually getting a 0.1 gram resolution from the load cell, but we didn't think it was necessary or appropriate to display 0.1 grams. We figured 1 gram accuracy, frankly, is plenty. And if you're a coffee bar that's hitting 34 grams, give or take 1 gram, you are the most consistent coffee bar in the world by a comfortable distance, I would argue. Whether it's down to sort of 0.5 of a gram. The standard deviation I was getting when I did a bunch of testing was about 0.4, which wasn't bad, I figured. That was pretty much what I wanted just about all the time. And the situations where there was overshoot, it was usually more to do with changing coffee and just needing to back the offset off a little bit more. So right now, the state we're at, yes.
You said the workflow was different, but then it wasn't?
Yeah, just you can't mess with the cups once you're brewing.
But it does tear after, so you can press the button, you can put the cups down and it will tear in these 3-4 seconds.
Yes. But you just, the temptation to move the cups is great sometimes.
Oh yeah,
one of the things I want to do.
Flowing on the edge of the cup.
Yeah. I just want to just bend the metal in 3 places here. One to signify if you're using just 1 cup, put it here. And another 2 either side of it, but if you're using 2 cups, put them here. You know what I mean? So you're lined up every time. And frankly, I don't know why we don't do that already. It would be, because every machine needs that. That would be useful. Would that be useful? Mm-hmm. I feel that would be useful, because we all miss sometimes, right? You're in a hurry and you can't get that.
That's going to be our last skill, James.
What?
After this machine is the last skill that we will have.
Just placing cups, right?
Yeah.
Well,
Don't do it.
No, I think we could still be better at being nice to people. And that's the thing for me. Like, it's kind of fun to do this and brew with this right now, because I get to look up a little bit more. You know what I mean? I can start a shot, keep an eye on it certainly more, but I'm pretty confident of what's going to happen, and I get some great data at the end of it about whether this was good or bad. So I'm a bit more relaxed when chatting, hanging out with people, talking to people. Everyone wants to know when they can have one, of course. Right now, the way we feel, the way I feel, I speak for me, this is excitingly accurate and doing the job right now, but it's doing it in a lab. It's not doing it in a real world environment, and that therefore means that we should not sell it yet. So what we're going to do now is, starting in July, we'll be doing some field testing with it around in different cafes around the world. You can try and find one, but the people using it will be asked not to talk about it during the testing phase. So we're going to see if the coffee tastes good, I guess. That's a pretty good metric. And then, depending on what we get back from field testing, we'd like to start making these available around about October time. But that's not a promise, because that means we may have to respond to issues that we find in field testing. But yeah, we figured we want to do one thing really well. There were lots of other ideas that came up with this machine, and some of the stuff matters a lot to me. The quantity of aluminium in here is pretty high, and I like aluminium a lot because it's incredibly recyclable. And if you recycle aluminium, it's about 5% of the energy used compared to producing new aluminium. Like, it's a wonderfully recyclable material, and I think we should be using a little bit more of those kind of things. A lot of work's done on power management and energy consumption. Yes?
Where are you using the aluminium?
Side panels.
The side panel.
Yeah. It's quite a lot throughout that sort of paneling and stuff. Makes
So
it a little
is
bit
it
lighter.
Part of the color of the group, so the color of the frontal panel, the room made in aluminium.
I have somewhere the breakdown of metal quantities in the machine, which they've done. I don't have it to mind. I'll do that now. But yeah, it's the little details which are exciting and kind of in the future. I think we will want to pursue more of that. It should use we should use less energy to make a coffee. You can kind of tell with a company that has solar panels on the roof and selling electricity back to the grid that they're kind of interested in sustainability and power and that kind of thing. And I think that shows in lots of places. So yeah, that's kind of what we're doing and why we're trying to do this. And I'm happy to answer more questions. I can talk a little bit about the grinder too. How am I doing for time?